There's some early coaches. I found that mentors and coaches have helped me all along the way. Was there someone that stood out to you, and what stuck? What uncomfortable truth maybe they told you, or what stuck with you?
Uncomfortable truth. Nobody's ever asked me that one. I got to think about that.
If you can, tell a story you've never told on a podcast. Is there a meeting or a decision that nearly derailed BNI's start or expansion, and how did you recover from it?
Well, the big story is I mean, if your listeners really want to hear how to deal with a massive problem, and work through it, that would be it. I think you've asked a couple of questions or made a couple of taken me in a direction or two that I haven't seen before. So well done.
Thank you.
I spent the first day or two going, what the heck just happened? Because we opened 20 chapters, 20. And I had no plan on opening 2. And we had 20. And that's when I had my Brody moment. I think your network is a beacon of hope in a sea of fear. When applied properly, it'll change your life. And when it changes enough lives, it'll change the world.
Welcome to the Perfect 100, the podcast for BNI members who want to maximize their membership, deepen their impact, and grow their business through intentional networking. I'm your host, Tammy Zurak, a CliftonStrengths coach, longtime BNI leader, and one of the few members worldwide to maintain a perfect Power of One score. Each week, we'll explore the habits, mindsets, and everyday strategies of BNI members who are turning their membership into momentum.
Hello, and welcome back to the Perfect 100. My guest today needs no introduction, but certainly deserves one. Dr. Ivan Misner is the founder and chief visionary officer of BNI, the world's largest business networking organization, with over 11,000 chapters in 76 countries. Known globally as the father of modern networking, Dr. Misner has written more than 30 books, including his newest, Networking is a Marathon, Not a Sprint, which was released on October 1st. His work has been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, The Today Show, and countless media outlets around the world. He holds a PhD from USC, has taught at multiple universities, co-founded the BNI Charitable Foundation, and still finds time for life beyond business with his lovely wife, Jody. Those of you that regularly listen to my podcast know that I am a CliftonStrengths coach, and I typically reveal the guest's assessment a little bit later in the episode. But I'd like to start at the top today because this will shape some of the conversation Dr. Misner and I will have. So from number 1 on down, Dr. Misner's top 5 are Futuristic, Achiever, Arranger, Activator, Maximizer, Discipline, Learner, Focus, Competition, and Self-Assurance. A combination that paints a picture of a visionary, results-driven leader who builds systems, drives performance, and inspires others to follow through. Not a big surprise. He also leads with the executing theme, although the influencing theme is right behind it. So today we're going to dig into the marathon mindset, a little nod to the book, and how that shows up in his leadership, his legacy, and the culture of connection he's built over the last 4 decades. Welcome, Ivan. This means so much for me to be here with you today, have you here. It's a great birthday present to me too, because today's my birthday. So welcome.
Happy birthday, 29, right?
Yeah, exactly. Over again.
Well, happy birthday, and it's great to be on. I love doing these. I think an entrepreneur is either working in their flame or working in their wax. And when they're working in their flame, they're on fire, they're excited, they love what they're doing, they're passionate about it. You can hear it in their voice, you can see it in the way they behave. When they're working in their wax, it just kind of takes all their energy away, and you can hear that in their voice, and you can see that in the way they behave. And this is my flame. I love being able to pour into people and talk about what I've done right in business, what I've done wrong, and how I can advise them to be successful.
Amazing. Yeah. And I'm certainly passionate about this, talking to you and BNI. I've been a member for a long time. So I want to dive back. I want to go all the way back to the beginning. So, let's go back to 1985. I was getting ready to graduate from high school, and you were sitting at a table deciding, how do I start this thing where people network? Now, I've read the book, so I know the story, but not everybody that is listening now knows what it is. So, what was the problem you were trying to solve, and how did that go?
Yeah, and what's not in the book, I'll share something that I don't think is in the book we're talking about is Giver's Gain, the BNI story. At least that's the book I think you're talking
Yes.
about. Um,
Yes.
the year before, I had gone to many, many networking organizations, and a lot of them were very mercenary. Everyone was trying to sell to me, and I would come home and I felt like I'd been slimed, and I needed to get a shower because everyone wanted to sell to me. And then I went to these other groups that were very social. It was happy hour and hors d'oeuvres, and nobody was doing business, and I didn't like those either. And so what I wanted was something that was focused on business, but not transactional, and something that was focused on building relationships, but not totally social. And the glue that would hold it together is our principal core value of giver's gain. This idea that if I help you, you'll help me, and we'll all do better as a result of it. So I put together that group that you mentioned. uh,
Yes.
and I asked them, is this something that you think would be interesting to do? And they all agreed, and we were off to the races. I'd like to tell you I had this vision of an international organization, but I just needed one group, to give me referrals for my consulting business, and of course I would give them referrals for their businesses, and it just blew up. I mean, we now have, like you said, over 11,400 chapters in more than 75 countries around the world.
Yeah, and I think that necessity is the mother of invention. I think if I remember the story right, you had just bought a house and you landed a big client, and then the big client went away, and now it's like, now what do we do?
Yeah, I had a mortgage that felt that big, and, and now all of a sudden I've lost this, big client that I just assumed would renew, but I didn't know their financials, and they were basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. So when the contract, was up for renewal, they didn't. And so, I got all my business through referrals and through speaking engagements. So I went out and did the rubber chicken circuit, Rotary Lions, Kiwanis, did all of those, and I formed this first group of BNI.
Okay, awesome. Well, and I feel like a lot of BNI members are probably, we're closer to that end of things than an international, organization that generates more gross national product than some small countries do. So
Yeah, we're
if
bigger.
you
Our GDP, our thank you for closed business is now bigger, or it's about the same size as the country of Iceland.
It's
So
amazing.
we actually generate more business for our members than more than 100 countries in the world based on United Nations estimates of GDP. You obviously
That's
read my material. Thank you.
I do. I might have heard you a time or two, and I think I've got, I pulled out the stack. I know if those are
Yeah.
people who watch, yeah,
Those are a
those
few
are
books
just
I've written, no
those are
question.
the physical ones. I think I have a whole bunch more on my audiobooks, but yeah, I follow your work. So, was there ever a time back in those early days where you thought you might fail? Maybe a bad meeting or a tough decision, where you might have even thought, "I'm going to give up on this."
Um, I never thought I was gonna give up.
Okay.
I always, uh, believed that there was a way around or through the challenges that I had, but I had many, 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 many challenges. I believe very strongly that you have to, and by the way, I made a lot of mistakes, lots and lots of mistakes. But I believe you have to define yourself by your successes, not your failures, and that your failures and mistakes become your tuition for success. And so I have paid a lot of tuition,
Right.
starting with that first year. I mean, just the way I set up BNI, and I talk about it briefly in Giver's Gain, was wrong. It was not scalable. And I don't want to get into the details because they're not relevant to most people, but the way I set it up was not scalable, and it had to be scalable. And the way I solved the problem was to get members together, and it was the beginning of the board of advisors, which still exists today after 40 years. and had members advise me on how to deal with this problem I created. And they did such an amazing job. Um, it was supposed to be just a task force, meet one time, solve the problem. But they were so great. It was like, well, we should meet all the time because you guys gave me great advice. And so they've been in existence for 40 years now.
That's amazing. I think that, as I'm a business coach, I talk to people all the time about they're good at the thing they do, and they probably have some subordinate kind of talents that support that thing that they do, but they can't do all the things. So having that board of advisors or a trusted group of BNI, chapter members often is the glue that makes your business holds it together and keeps it moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm assuming that's why you do, strength finders, because
Yes.
it helps to figure out, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses or potential weaknesses are, and, ironically, I don't think I said this to you, but ironically, I taught leadership at Concordia University for several years, and this was one of the things that the students were required to do was strength finders so that they could figure out, what are their strengths and what are the areas that they need to surround themselves with people who have strengths in those areas, that you don't have strengths.
Yeah, I definitely wish I've said this several times before on this recordings, but I think that if I had had the opportunity to take the assessment when I was in college or coming out of high school, maybe going into college and knowing, okay, here's what your unique set of talents are, now go build on them, would have been so much more helpful to me than finding them out. The first time I took it was in 2005. Now, I did take Myers-Briggs and DISC earlier on.
Yeah, I did disc.
Yeah, so those both, do you remember what you are in DISC?
Yeah, yeah, a classic entrepreneur, high D, high I, low S, low C, which is
Okay.
basically, pretty assertive, fairly people-oriented. I take on too many things and I'll do it my own way. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm high D
Yeah.
also, so I get it. So your futuristic strength, it imagines what's possible. Was the vision of what you wanted to do with BNI, was that apparent to other people, or did you have to kind of bring them along to get people to follow?
Well, I think, you always have to bring people along. They not everybody gets the exact same vision that you've got, and sometimes they're, ancillary visions don't match up. They don't align fully with yours. Um, so, I mean, let's talk about the vision because and now my title, I'm no longer CEO, but founder and chief visionary officer. So,
Yes.
I have really truly believed in setting a vision out early on, and I didn't think BNI was going to be a global organization. I didn't think we'd have two chapters, but people kept asking me to help them open another chapter, and since we only take one person per professional classification, I had to open up a second one and a third one, even though at first I said, "No, no, this isn't what I do. I'm a business consultant." And they talked me into it. It was January 8th, 1985 that I opened the first chapter. By December, every year for decades now, I have taken, a few days to a week off to reflect. How did I do last year? To look forward, what do I want to do in the next year and the next 5 years? That year, I spent the first day or two going, what the heck just happened? Because we opened 20 chapters, 20. And I had no plan on opening two. And we had
Right,
20. And that's when I had my Brody moment.
which
Do
is?
you ever see the movie Jaws?
Yes.
Okay, Sheriff Brody at the end of the movie is throwing chum out into the ocean. You see the shark for the first time. You actually see the shark come out of the water, and Sheriff Brody turns to the captain, ship's captain, and he says, "You're going to need a bigger boat." And
Yes.
it was December of '85 where I realized I'm going to need a bigger boat. This is going to be way bigger than I anticipated, and I need to have a plan. And that's when I started to calculate, and this is before Monsieur Google, where you could just get on the internet and look at populations. I went to the university library and did research on populations and the number of cities, and calculated. Took me 6 months to do it. Calculated that someday BNI could have over 10,000 chapters. And I said, and that's kind of vision, your question is, do you have to get other people on board? And the answer is yes. It starts with core values. And you got to be really clear about your core values, and you got to train people on your core values to get to that vision. Because if you don't teach people your organizational core values, they'll make up their own and you might not like them.
Yes, and
So
that I read your Infinite Legacy book too, and I think that speaks to what that book covered, right?
yeah, it did talk about that you've got to create, if you want to create a legacy, it's what you do in life that matters. And you've got to have a clear understanding of what your personal values are and what your company values are. And then you got to share those values and share that vision with everybody.
Love that. So let's move into that scaling a little bit. When you realized that it was going to be bigger than when people were knocking down your doors to have you build your business, which not all of us are that lucky. I think that it's amazing. My husband has what I like to call a blue ocean business, where there aren't a lot of people that are doing what he does. So when somebody's reaching out to you saying there's nothing like this, thank goodness you're here. That's an amazing thing that probably most of us don't get to have. But how did those conversations go from sort of you leading to shifting to kind of more institutional? Because you can't be over all the things all the time. What did that look like?
Well, once um, we got past sort of where I live and people who knew me, which certainly was within that first 20 chapters or so, it wasn't quite as easy as you might think. I mean, most people that I met thought we were multi-level. Is this Amway? No, no, it's not. We're not. We have multi-level members in the organization, but we're not multi-level. So there was a fair amount of, okay, let me explain how this works to people. That said, once people understood how it works, particularly when they went to a meeting, they're like, okay, I get it. And and to scale, you have to have a plan, and you have to write everything down. I mean, one of the very first things I did was write and I have a blog. If you take a look at my blog, it's I forget the title for this blog, but it's my first 5-year plan or something like that. I wrote an org chart. I did, and this is before PowerPoint where you could have nice graphics. I hand drew an org chart with 10 or 12 positions in it. No, it was 15 positions in it. Now it was me and 2 part-time employees. That's what I had. So what I did was I plugged my name. This is the first thing I did to scale. Plugged my name into all the boxes where I was doing things, and their names, the 2 ladies, their names into the boxes where they were doing things. So they were the 2 of them were in like 4 boxes and I was in 11. And so it was, Ivan Misner, CEO, Ivan Misner, Director of Marketing, Ivan Misner, Complaint Department, Ivan Misner, janitor, right? 'Cause I took the trash out. I worked it on it was in my house. And so, um, what I did then was every time I hired somebody for one of those boxes, I scratched out my name, and I wrote in the name of the person I hired to do that job. And,
That sounds like the E Myth, right?
yeah,
And it was pre E Myth though, and so you were already
it was
had the.
I think the E-Myth came out in '86, didn't it? Because I was reading the E-Myth right about then.
I'm not
80
sure exactly when, but that sounds like a similar type of format
well,
to
100%. As a matter of fact, I was talking about somebody asked me what were one of the books that you read when you were, starting to scale, and I mentioned the E-Myth on the radio, as I was driving. Now this is like 1990, and, so you couldn't do any interviews unless you were live in studio. So I had to drive down to San Diego to do this interview. And then so it was playing in San Diego. And the next day I get this phone call. And my assistant said, there's somebody on the phone that wants to talk to you. I'm like, okay, who? Michael Gerber. His name is Michael Gerber. And I'm like, Michael
the
Gerber,
author. Yeah.
the author of the E-Myth. He's on the
Yeah.
phone right now. She said, yes. So I took his call. And he said, hey, I heard you I heard you on the radio yesterday as I was driving to a meeting. And I just wanted to thank you for talking about the E-Myth as being an important book. And I urge people to read it. I think it's in its second, third, fourth edition. I know Michael. Michael and I have become good friends. If you go to my blog at ivanmeisner.com and do a search on Michael Gerber, you'll see a number of videos that I did with him. But yeah, you want to scale your business, start with the E-Myth.
Yeah, I saw one of those interviews that you did with him, so I had to go and look at my list. I couldn't remember the name was escaping me, so I pulled it up on my phone while you were talking, so I'm like, "That sounds so familiar." But I do have that one as well, and I love that. So your arranger and your maximizer in your Clifton Strengths, those typically thrive on systems and making them better, or people and putting them in the right places. So what has been the hardest part of not optimizing everything by yourself, do you think? And relying on all those other people.
This episode is brought to you by Tammy Zurak Coaching. Ready to build your strengths, your business, and your brand? Visit TammyZurak.com and click the button to book your free strategy chat. Let's turn your passion into a thriving success. TammyZurak.com.
Well, yeah, listen, I did graduate school and I understand that you got to delegate. One of the things that they don't teach you in graduate school is a really important concept in delegation. And I'm working on a book right now called Garage to Global. How do you take your business from your garage and make it global? And and in delegation, you don't see this written in. I haven't seen it written anywhere other than on my blog. You have to delegate responsibility and authority. We tend to delegate responsibility, but not authority. And so the employee screws up, and then you have the supervisor or the owner or the founder saying, gee, it'd just be easier to do this myself. Well, yeah, for a few weeks, but not long term. Doing it yourself's not scalable. So what you do is you delegate responsibility and you delegate 50% authority to start with. And you say, 50, 40, 60, it doesn't matter. You delegate a percentage and you say, you may make any decision within this box. Okay. If you make a mistake, it's going to happen. It's okay. And then over time, you give them 60% authority, 70% authority, 80%, 90. I would give employees up to 95% authority. I only held back two things with all my employees. One was a dollar amount, which varied depending on the role. So the receptionist was, I don't know, $50, $100, whatever. You spend whatever you need. You don't have to come to me for, for everything you need up to this amount. The chief operating officer was probably something like 5 or 10,000. You spend whatever you need up to that and then have a conversation with me if it's over that. So once you have somebody who's no longer a learner, they understand the role. You have to delegate both responsibility and authority. And don't worry about whether they're going to make a mistake or not. They will.
Right, for
It's
sure. Well,
inevitable.
and being a high D, I know that feeling of wanting to do it all yourself because sometimes it's easier to get it done the way you want. When,
It is, but not forever.
right,
No, that's not scalable. And
exactly.
and plus you wanna put people around you that have better strengths in areas like strength finders. I remember one of the first people I hired was a bookkeeper, and, I can get my way around a financial statement, and I used to pay the bills myself. Friday afternoon, I was paying bills, um, and I remember hiring the bookkeeper and being so glad that I didn't have to do the bookkeeping anymore, and they pay I signed the checks, but I didn't enter all the data. And I remember when the bookkeeper came to me and it was like in the first month or so. And she said, Ivan, I balanced the books because I never balanced my checkbook. I just
Okay.
ID, right? Don't
Yes.
balance it. So I never balanced it. So she said, I balanced it. And I found everything, but we were 5 cents off, 5 pennies. And she said, I dug back in and I found the 5 pennies. It took me a couple of hours, but I found the
Oh my
five
god.
pennies. And I remember talking to a friend of mine and telling that story. And he said, well, did you reprimand her for spending 2 hours on 5 cents? And I said, no. I congratulated her. I said, well done. He said, but she spent more money trying to find the 5 cents. I said, I know. However, what if it were $50? What if it was $500? She wouldn't go home.
Right.
She would stay and do it. Now, if it were $50, I'd go, it's close enough. It's
Yeah,
close enough to being balanced. But that was her flame. That's what
sure.
she
That's
was
awesome.
passionate about, not me. but her. And so
Yes,
if you delegate effectively, you're delegating authority to people who are excited about that aspect of the work, and you're not. I'm not.
right. So you scaled to more than 11,000 chapters over the course of the last 40 years. What personal leadership lesson was the hardest one to learn as that growth was happening?
Oh, how long is this interview? um, you learn things along the way. Certainly, I think one of the first things that I had to remind myself of, particularly in the early days, but even to this day, was so my mom, when I was 13, I'm 69. When I was 13, my mom gave me this paperweight. It's on my desk. It has been on my desk since I was 13 years old. It says, "Diplomacy is the art of letting someone else have your way."
Mm,
High D, right? So
yes.
she said, "You're a bull in a china shop. You just knock stuff over. You knock people over. You have got to learn how to cooperate with people. This is about collaboration, not manipulation. But if you can learn how to do that, you'll be a great leader." And it was a lesson that, when you have this basic behavioral style, you're constantly reminding yourself of that lesson. But I certainly had that in the early days of BNI. But I think there are other things like, contextual intelligence. You have to understand the context of the environment. This is a leadership concept taught to me by, Warren Bennis. I studied under him at the University of Southern California. He was the John Maxwell of his day in terms of leadership knowledge. Contextual intelligence, where you got to really understand the context of the problem, and then a situational decision making. So when you understand the context and you understand the situation, you're able to make a better decision. And those are two leadership skills that I think were really important to learn over the years. And I talk about it in a book I wrote called The Third Paradigm, which is about co-creation. And when people are really, 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 really mad at you, and I tell a story in the book about how people were really, really mad at me, um, you have to do a couple of things. One is plead guilty. Don't don't equivocate. Yep, you're right. I didn't do this the way I said it would be done. It was. I mean, I tried to, but it didn't work. And then I have a strategy in there that's great for getting through big challenges if you want to be a super leader. I call it listen till they drop. And these people were so mad at me. I said, I want you to tell me everything you're mad at. Everything. We have a 3-hour meeting. I have a flip chart. I want to write everything down that you're upset about. And I'm going to tape it on the walls. And we'll take the entire time if we need to. We're not taking any breaks. If you need a bio break, go ahead and take it. If you need some coffee, go get it. I wanted to create a tension of, I can't leave. I want to hear what else they yell at him about, right? So, I wrote this 600 items. I
Wow.
wallpapered the entire room with all the complaints they had, and that was 2.5 hours. And listen till they drop is a strategy where you just let everyone get it out. Get it out. And that you also have to, here's another ancillary strategy. You got to let barking dogs in the room. Meaning,
Meaning,
meaning in this particular group of people, I made sure there were some of the people who were maddest, who had, uh, they didn't have situational power, but they had personal power. They were respected by people who weren't in the room, and they barked a lot. And so you got to let the barking dogs in. You don't want to because you don't need that. But on the other hand, if it happens and you listen until they get it all out, then they're open to an idea. And I went into this with a total strategy in mind. But I knew that into this situation that I talk about in the third paradigm, I knew that if I went into it and just said, "Here's my strategy to fix it," they would just unload on me because they hadn't been heard. And so, I made sure that they were heard. These are all lessons, and I have a lot of those in the third paradigm. If you get that book, just here's something that's just between us, okay, Tammy? You
Yes,
can't tell
I'm
people.
listening.
Okay. First of all, we surveyed 4 or 5,000 people as to what is good co-creation. But here's the part that we don't say in the book. Intertwined into all the data and the information and our strategies about co-creation, there's a story about a guy named Richard and an online platform. What we never say in the book is Richard's my middle name, and the online platform was BNI Connect. Uh,
Ah,
I didn't want to make the book about me. I wanted people to read the story and get the story and not have it too personal. But if you pick up the third paradigm, I'm Richard.
okay, that's good to know. So you're
But
getting all
just between
the
us, okay, Tammy?
we're
Just
getting the
between us.
Easter eggs, I get
Yeah, I
it.
bet it is.
And well, and as a recovering bull in a china shop, I can appreciate all of that. I think that one of the reasons why I wanted to do CliftonStrengths and get certified for that is because you sometimes lose sight of what everyone else brings, and you can't do all the things. And when you can bring those things together, where they support you in what they're great at, and so on, we all work together better. So that's amazing. So, let's talk about, these kind of long-term views really play nicely into your next or newest book. So let's dig into the marathon legacy and learning mindset. So in your new book, networking is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yep,
Really feels
just
like
came out.
both
This is it.
yeah, oh, okay, awesome. I got the audio version because I just can find time easier to listen than to hold the book and read it myself, but, it feels more like a mindset almost to some degree. What inspired the metaphor, and how do you live it daily?
Well, what inspired the metaphor was I saw people treating networking like a sprint, and they. The frustrating thing for me was they were doing everything I was telling them to do, but they were doing it on steroids. And at some point, you just burn yourself out because, I mean, what are those things? Well, like if you belong to a chamber, you got to go to the chamber events. If you belong to BNI, you got to show up at the BNI meetings. And in BNI, we meet every week. So that's a weekly commitment. You've got to do one-to-ones with individuals. So, I mean, there's a whole series of things that you need to do in order to network effectively. And I would see people who would embrace these concepts so deeply that they would burn themselves out. And I would have conversations with them and say, you're doing everything right. You're just doing too much of it, too
Right,
fast. Okay.
right.
Take a deep breath. I wrote another book, Who's in Your Room? And in there, I talk about balance and the difference between balance and harmony. There you go. That's the second edition. Um, and one of the things that you have to have is margins in your life. You have to have margins, like margins in a book or on a piece of paper, where it's your time. It's free time. It's time to think. It's time to do something fun, something interesting, something that brings you joy. And and I would see these people that wanted to be so successful that they didn't create margins in their life, and they were so focused on doing it all and doing it all right now that they burned them out. And even though I told them, "Don't do that," they did it. So finally, it got to the point where it's like, "Okay, I need to write a book on this," where, we literally say, "Pace yourself." You gotta pay in a I'm not a runner, but, one of my co-authors is, and, in a marathon, you gotta pace yourself. You can't run full out, um, for yourself. You can't run full out for, over 20 miles. You can't do it.
Right.
So, you gotta pace yourself, and that's really what the book was about is how do you pace yourself? How do you do these things that you gotta do, but you do it in an effective way, giving yourself margins?
What I love, mile 19, otherwise known as chapter 19, is
Yeah,
was
we did the chapters like, miles, yeah.
Yes, the it gave me I my number one, Clifton strength is strategic. I share a lot of yours. I have maximizer and achiever and some of the other ones that you have, but strategic really rings my bell. And it talked about, and I am that person who does too much. I go too many places and talk to too many people, and sometimes I lose sight of that. I need to focus more, and I have high focus, but I sometimes still, need to be reminded, which is what the book did, to stop and what is my objective here. And I loved the concept of how to utilize your networking partners in a unique way. I won't give it away. I'll let them read the book, but in a way that makes more sense to, while somebody's sitting in front of you, having multiple meetings and getting them to really dive deep into how they can actually help you versus just
Yeah,
sort of talking about it.
right. Right. Listen, if your network is a mile wide and an inch deep, it'll never be very powerful. You need to have a network that's wide. You need to know a lot of people. You need to have visibility out in the world. But in certain places, you also need to have deeper relationships where you have this wide network, but in some places it gets also deep, and that's where things like the one to ones come into. Where you're meeting with somebody and you're having a one to one conversation with them. So when I say, people would burn themselves out, I think of, and I think believe I tell the story in the book about a very particular person who's like, if one to one a week is great, five will be five times better. And I remember vividly saying to him, no, 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 five, you're doing 20 to ones a month. Take a deep breath, instead of doing all those other one to ones, spend time thinking about how you can help the last person because you want referrals, help somebody else. That's what Givers Gain is all about. Help somebody else
Yeah, I love
and
that.
they'll help you.
Yeah, so thinking about your earlier days, who coached you? You mentioned your mom kind of gave you the bull on the china shop sort of advice. What, from a business perspective, were there some early coaches? I found that mentors and coaches have helped me all along the way. Was there someone that stood out to you, and what stuck, what uncomfortable truth maybe they told you, or what stuck with you?
Uncomfortable truth. Nobody's ever asked me that one. I got to think about that. Um,
Okay.
I mean, I think most people I who really gave me advice knew me well enough to know that I wouldn't be highly offended over them being honest. Maybe tactful would be good, but honest. Um, I mean, my I had a lot of virtual mentors. Like Michael Gerber was a virtual mentor long before I met him, and he became a mentor. Michael, I now consider to be a close friend, and we continue. And I've mentored him. He's called me and asked for advice about certain things with business. So you can get to a point where you can mentor your mentor if you pay attention to what they're telling you and what other people are telling you that you trust. Jack Canfield, who has also become a very close friend. I've known Jack for 20 years. Uh, Jack, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, the series, co-wrote it, and of course, Success Principles. Jack is a mentor and very close friend. And if you go to my blog, you'll see several videos that I've done with Jack. Stuart Emery, definitely a mentor. He co-wrote Who's in Your Room with Me, and we co-wrote it because he came up with this idea and he gave it to me. I'm like, about the people that you let into your life, you let into your room. And I said, that's great. You got to write a book. He says, yeah, we're going to. And see him every 6 months. And I'd say, how's the book? And he'd say, well, I haven't done it, haven't started it. And finally he said, oh, look, do you want to co-write it with me? And I'm like, yes, I want to co-write it. Boom, we got the book. So,
Nice.
your mentors can become, you can get to a point where you mentor your mentors. And certainly I've gotten to that point with them. Richard Branson. I consider him a mentor. I've had a chance to meet him 10, 12 times. I've spent 5 weeks on his island over a period of times. And he's got nuggets. He's brilliant. I mean, one of my favorite things that he says is any idiot can make something complicated. It takes a brilliant mind to keep things simple.
I like that.
Yeah, and it's so important, and it's certainly one of the problems that we have always had in BNI, and you have in any business that scales, is this idea of feature creep. People, try to change stuff. It's just it's human nature. They just try they try to change it because they think it'll make it better, even though they don't know that it was done 20 years ago and it made things worse. But they
Right.
didn't know because they weren't here. It's the curse of complexity, I call it in the book we're working on, Garage to Global. The curse of complexity. Keep things as simple as possible.
Yeah, it always amazes me that, this has been 40 years in the making and people still want to put their own tweaks on things. And it's like, if it's, keep it simple, stupid, if it's already working, it's worked for 40 years. So let's just keep doing what we're supposed to do because somebody already tried this. So, why do we want a definition of insanity is like, what, I don't know, something like that.
Well,
Anyway.
yeah, it's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But here, this issue is what you're saying to begin with, which is this organization has been around for 40 years. Just follow the program. Why reinvent the wheel? And people just love reinventing the wheel, and they love arguing about reinventing the wheel. I remember I had one guy once, and it's been a long time. I found that the more gray hair I get, the less pushback I get when I speak publicly. But probably about 15 years ago, I had a guy in the audience say, why is attendance so important? You don't have to be there. I know who these people are. I can give them referrals. So I gave him hard data about a chapter that dropped their absenteeism by 50%, their membership went up by almost 100%, and their referrals went up by 164%. And he's like, "Oh, that's just one exception. I don't believe it." And so I remember saying to him, what do you?" There was an audience of like 400 people. Unfortunately, he had a mic. So I said, "Well, what do you do?" He said, "I'm a financial planner." I said, "Are you good?" He said, "Yeah, I'm a really good financial planner." I said, "How long have you been doing it?" 15 years. I said, "Do you ever have anyone where you give advice, financial advice to, and they just say, 'Oh, no, no, I'm not gonna do that. That's a bad idea.'" He said, "Yeah, yeah, it drives me crazy." I said, "Okay. I've been doing this," I think at that time it was 25 or 30 years. "I've been doing this 25, 30 years. Eh, I got a lot of people who think I'm pretty good at this. My advice to you is do this. Do it, don't do it, it's up to you. You can reinvent the wheel just like your client did, or you can follow the program and make money." And I got such loud applause, he just handed the mic back and sat down.
Nice. All right. So the next part I want to talk about is resilience, the strengths that have kept you going even when things got hard. If you can, tell a story you've never told on a podcast. Is there a meeting or a decision that nearly derailed BNI's start or expansion, and how did you recover from it?
Staying ahead in a world driven by technology is key. At Wisdom Integrators, we don't just solve problems, we create opportunities. Wisdom Integrators, connecting your world, solving your problems.
Well, the big story is in the third paradigm. I mean, if your listeners really want to hear how to deal with a massive problem, and work through it, that would be it. Um, I think you've asked a couple of questions or made a couple of taken me in a direction or two that I haven't seen before. So well done.
Thank you.
Something other than that, I remember being in a meeting, um, oh, a long time ago, 20 years ago, maybe. And it was a similar group of people. We call them the founder circle. And it was the founder circle, but years earlier. And there was something they just didn't particularly like. I don't even remember what it was. And one woman stood up and she was very respectful, but did not like the direction that we were going, and made a very articulate argument as to why we should absolutely go in a completely different direction than where I was diplomatically nudging people to. And so the answer to your question is, as a leader, sometimes you not only need to shut up, but you need to really, really hear what they have to say. Not just listen till they drop, but hear what they have to say. And I let her explain her idea thoroughly, and I was probably quiet for had to be 45 seconds. Now, when you're standing up, it wasn't a huge room, it's founder circles, maybe 35 people. When you're standing up, you're in charge, you're standing there and you're quiet for 45 seconds. That's an eternity, right? I could see people who were like, okay, what's going on? And I kind of just went through my mind everything that she had just said. And I realized that the direction I was going was probably the wrong direction. And so I said, you know what? I think I'm wrong. I think you're probably right. Let's meet after this meeting and talk this through better to see if it plays out kind of like you have in mind. And thank you for your thoughtful idea.
I love that.
And
And
it,
go ahead.
it's so hard to do because you
Yes.
get committed to something and you're going that direction and you're persuading everybody and we were kind of getting there. And then she wants to take it someplace completely different, but you have to keep an open mind and listen to what your team. Otherwise, why have a team if you don't
Right.
listen to
And
what
what
they're going to tell you?
what is the founder circle for those that have never heard of it?
Yeah, so the Founder Circle are like the top BNI franchises in the world, um, and there's about 36 of them that we invite to every U.S. conference and international convention. And so they're invited, and they meet. Now we have the technology to meet. They meet online throughout the year as well, and they meet to talk about, um, different strategies, different things that are being done. Particularly like with BNI Connect, our online platform, we want to tweak this, we want to tweak that. This is working, that's not working. What do you guys recommend? We have so we say don't just make stuff up, but we do make changes. We make changes through an experimental program. So if somebody has a great idea and they want to test it out, we often use the Founder Circle to test it. So things like the education coordinator, which is is a staple of every chapter now. Somebody who every week does some education on networking, usually on networking. That was an experimental program. Membership committees were an experimental program. And so we're willing to make changes, but we don't want to make them willy-nilly, and we don't want somebody in Timbuktu to just make a decision that this is the way they're going to go. There's got to be a system plan, and there's got to be data to back it up, because without the data, it's just an interesting idea that may or may not work.
Yeah, and I think members, they don't realize that that's the case. So those changes that we talked about earlier that they want to make, they don't recognize that that's already been there, done that, and a team of people who are doing the same type of thing they're doing have already tried and tested it and got data on it. So that's amazing. So you've been doing this for an amazing 40 years. Has your definition of visionary started to shift from what comes next to who carries it forward yet?
Well, I mean, I think the founder of an organization is uniquely qualified to have that role, chief visionary officer. And it was 11 years ago. BNI had a transaction where I took investors into the company. I still own part of the company. I'm still on the board of directors. As a matter of fact, I'm going to visit headquarters next week, so I still go to global office. So the CEO 11 years ago, Graham Weimiller, who's working on the Garage to Global book with me,
Okay.
he said, I'd like to add something to your title, founder and chief visionary officer. And I thought that was too woo-woo 11 years ago. I'm like, what? Chief visionary officer? He's like, yeah. And it was funny. He kind of had to convince me that the role I have played for years is to be a visionary with the organization. I never defined myself that way. And so I actually got on the internet and started looking up chief visionary officer. who holds that role? What is that role? And I found that it's almost always the founders who have that title first. There might be somebody else later, but it's almost always the founder. And it's a founder who really does like the strategic planning, like the vision making, is good about wanting to see where the organization's going to go to be healthy. So the short answer to your question is I didn't see myself as that until 11 years ago.
Okay, well, and your strengths play right to that, right? I mean, your number one is futuristic, so I mean, visionaries in the words, you know.
It is, it is. But I mean, to me, it was a plan. I was a planner. I was trying to create strategic plans. But yeah,
Okay,
I
so
I
if
think it's easier for somebody else to call you things um,
for sure.
that are very generous and very nice like that. I remember, now we're gonna go back, 30, 35 years. I had, written a couple of books on networking. I wrote the first book on word of mouth and networking, and my publicist, um, said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna start pitching you to the radio stations as the world's leading expert on business networking." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 you can't say that." And they're like, "Why?" I'm like, "I call myself the world's leading expert." This is 1994, right?
Right.
And so she said, "Okay, name 3 people that you would consider to be national leading experts on business networking." And I couldn't.
Couldn't find any. Right.
I said, "I can't think of any." And she said, "Look, Ivan, you're the world's leading expert on the topic. Lean into it."
Yes.
And so, she as long as she's putting that out on the resume, that's fine.
Yeah, and here you are. Look how it worked out.
Worked out pretty well. I'm
Yeah.
okay with it.
Yeah. So if you could whisper something, if you could go back again to 1985, we're time traveling a lot today, and whisper something in your 29-year-old self's ear that would change things, what would that one thing be, and what do you think it might have changed?
Well, I wouldn't wanna change things, which doesn't mean that I, didn't make mistakes. Like I said early on in the discussion, I made many, many, many mistakes. But again, your mistakes are your tuition for success. And so the mistakes I made taught me what not to do. I was always very focused on what did I learn from that? I remember the very first BNI meeting I went to where the members were just up in arms over something. They were just really, really mad. And I gave them an answer. I don't remember what the answer was, but whatever my answer was, it made it worse than, than before. And I
Okay.
remember driving home and I had a little notepad next to me. And I remember thinking, okay, first of all, I was like, bad word, bad word, bad word. Those people, they had me drive all the way over there and then they yell at me. And then I said to myself, a phrase that I love, based on results, Ivan, how did that work out for you?
Mm,
And I had to say, no, not very well. So, what would I do different if I was in a situation like that again? And while I'm in, parking lot traffic of Los Angeles, I just
lots of time
jotted
to
down
think.
notes. Now, why is that important? It's important because that then became the lesson plan that I used to train all my employees. Had I not experienced that very bad situation where they just tore me apart, and the answer I gave was horrible, and so they tore me apart. Had that not happened, I wouldn't have written that list. If I hadn't written that list, I wouldn't have trained people on it. First thing on the list, by the way, was shut up.
Okay. Well, I was just
Those are
gonna say,
shut.
I'm looking at your strengths again, and self-assurance is number 10, and I think that you have to have some level of self-assurance to be able to sort of look yourself in the mirror and say, "You screwed that one up," and then be open to, whether it's the lady who stood up in the founder circle or coming out of one of those meetings and saying, "Okay, I did something wrong here, and I need to try to figure out what that is." I love that.
So I wouldn't tell myself to change anything. I tell you what I would say to my 29-year-olds. So 28, I was actually 28 when I started BNI. Um, I would say, um, live your values. Things will work out fine. And
Awesome.
I'd probably also, whisper, "And you'll be fine with girls. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about women. You're stressed out over women. Don't worry about women. Things will work out okay. You'll be fine. You'll meet amazing women. It'll be
Yeah, well,
an incredible part of your life."
that's,
Um,
actually my next question actually has to do with that, so, it's amazing
well,
that you said that to me
but the most
because you
well, let's come to that. The most
yeah,
important part of it was live your values. If you live your values, you're gonna be great. Things will be okay. It's when I believe it's when you don't really live your values, when you're kind of walking the line or you cross the line, that you really have regrets. And I may regret something I said to someone at a point, but I don't regret most of my decisions because the decisions I made were the decisions that I made using my values with the best information I had at the moment. I may have learned I was wrong, but I used the best information I had in the moment. So I would just say, focus on your values and live them.
yeah, that's, I mean, you can't get any better advice than that.
So we're going
So,
to
you
talk about
mentioned
girls now.
yes, you mentioned girls, so yeah, I know you met your first wife, Elizabeth, through BNI and married her in 1989. From everything I read, she embodied the giver's gain, core value that we all know and love at this point. She sadly passed in 2020, but it's clear that she played a major part in your life and the journey through BNI. So I was curious what lessons she taught you about balance, because I know small business owners, we have that tough time of balance, perspective, staying grounded as you grew, kind of through global success. So walk me through that if you don't mind.
Well, yeah, we were married 31 years, a long time, Elizabeth and I. I think one of the things she taught me is who's in your room. We talked about margins, the importance of having margins and taking time for yourself. So she was very important there. She was also active in the business until we started having children, and then she was active in the charitable foundation. I think one of the things that she I'll give you 2 things, but I won't go deeply into the second one. The first thing is she taught we talked about she brought it to me, um, about the way you really can stay married for a long time is to give each other grace. And, there are lines, if you cross a line that, you're not gonna necessarily give, but assuming you're not crossing the crazy lines, give each other grace. Ask yourself, did this person do what they did? Did they do it because they just weren't thinking, or did they do it because they were being mean? And if they did it just because they weren't thinking, give them grace and let them know how you feel and then let it go. And so we lived a lot of our marriage really giving each other grace. She probably had to give me more grace than I had to do. Guys tend to do really stupid things, not thinking.
Well,
And so yeah, but I met her in BNI. We met at a leadership team training.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's amazing. I think there's been a lot of BNI relationships. I know at
there
least
are.
2 or 3 of them here locally. So it not only brings people together for business, but for love. So it's a great thing.
It does, and as you know, I just got remarried
Yes.
in 2023, and it was a referral, literally a referral. I mentioned Jack Canfield, so I've known Jack a long time. Jack's business partner, Patty Aubrey, said to me, "Hey, I know this amazing woman," and I had mentioned that I'm starting to get back out there because women have changed a lot since I dated 35 years ago, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so it's like, okay, I need to get out and at least just meet some women in a sort of dating environment. And so Patty Aubrey said, I know this amazing woman. She works for Jack and I. She was employed by Jack. Jack retired, by the way, in case you don't
Okay.
know. Jack Canfield just retired.
I did
So
not know that.
her name's Jody, and so she lived in Santa Barbara. So we literally met on Zoom.
That's hilarious.
We met on Zoom in 2021, and we dated a couple of years and got married.
And that's the best referral you could have had.
It was a great referral. It came from a mutual friend.
Good
This referral
stuff.
thing works out pretty well.
Yeah, it does. Well, all right, and I'm gonna shift gears just a little bit. This podcast is called The Perfect 100. With CliftonStrengths like Strategic and Maximizer, I naturally track the power of one as a measure of how well members are using the framework that you have built over all these years in BNI. I like to lead from the front, so I have a perfect 100. But what would you say to members who haven't yet realized that consistently following the activities will dramatically improve their success?
Yeah, and I would say this to anyone listening to this, whether you're in BNI or not. If you really want to be successful in business, you got to do six things 1,000 times, not 1,000 things six times. And it doesn't have to be six, it can be five, it can be seven, but you do a handful of things and you do it over and over and over and over again. And it's that consistency over a long period of time that really makes it work. And so with systems like the power of one, you do those things consistently and you're going to generate business. You're going to generate business like one-to-ones. We know that if you do one-to-one a week compared to one-to-one a month. So 4 a month versus 1 a month. And in a one-to-one, you talk to the other person about what they're doing and what they're working on. And, you maybe do what I talk about in some of my books, the gains exchange, where you talk about goals and accomplishments. So you do a legitimate one-to-one that's focused on business, not social, not just social. So the people who do 4 versus 1 pass almost exactly 100% more referrals.
Wow.
But more importantly, they receive almost exactly 100% more referrals, double
Yes.
the number of referrals. How could that be? It comes from that consistency of going out and connecting with people, not sprinting, 4 a month, that's a marathon. You're doing 1 a week and you're thinking about that person and trying to help them. Then you do another one. It's that consistency over time that makes it work. And the problem with a lot of entrepreneurs is and I keep this in my drawer because I talk about this all the time. Entrepreneurs are constantly chasing bright, shiny objects. Oh, look at this. Let's try this. Oh no, and here's another one over here. And so they're always chasing bright, shiny objects instead of focusing on what's known to work. Well, what do you know works? You watch shows like this. You listen to people who you trust and respect. You get mentors, both virtual mentors, real mentors. You do those things and you do them over and over and over and over again. You're gonna be successful.
Love that. All right, and last question. Calling back on your number one futuristic strength, when you picture BNI 20 years from now, what do you hope people will say about the culture and community that you help shape, and what amazing possibilities do you see coming for us all?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, I'm not sure anybody's crystal ball can actually go out 20 years. That's a long ways to go. But
Yes.
I think a crystal ball can go out at least 5, maybe as much as 10 years. Um, I believe that a legacy, and you've got the book on legacy. Your How you show up in the world is your legacy. And so, how if BNI continues to show up through our philosophy of givers gain, we're going to leave an amazing legacy in the world. I think your network is a beacon of hope in a sea of fear. We live in a crazy world. And so the people that you surround yourself with, that you trust, they trust you, they make all the difference in your success. And so to me, givers gain is more than a phrase. It's a way of living one's life. It's a perspective to view and interact with the world. It's an attitude, not an expectation. And when it's applied properly, it'll change your life. And when it changes enough lives, it'll change the world. And I believe we are changing the way the world does business through our philosophy of givers gain.
We absolutely are. And this has been amazing, incredible. I think you built a legacy that has changed, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people's lives. I think, I've built 2 businesses through BNI, and it just it's the gift that keeps on giving. So I wanted to express my gratitude for all that you've built, and I mean, you being here today. I appreciate that. And um, thank you so much.
Really my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And for everybody listening, remember that success isn't about quick wins. It's about consistency, connection, and character over time. So run your marathon with purpose, rather, and lead with your strengths. And before you leave, be sure to subscribe. And thanks. And we will see you next time on The Perfect 100.
Thanks for listening to The Perfect 100. If today's episode sparked a new idea or inspired you to show up differently in your chapter, share it with your team. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. And if you're curious about your own Clifton strengths and how to bring out the best in yourself or your chapter or your business, head to TammyZurak.com to learn more about building your superpowers into everything you do. Keep showing up, keep connecting, and keep building your perfect 100.